911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, and includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised, explicit content included. These stories are based on real life EMS and first responder experiences. The calls are real, the providers are real. Names and patient details have been changed to protect privacy. Episodes may include trauma, suicide, abuse, medical emergencies, mental health struggles, or things your HR department would definitely not approve of. Any advice, opinions, or discussion of medical procedures are based on personal experience and should never override your local protocols, medical direction, or training. Use your damn brain. Follow your guidelines and your local or agency protocols, follow your training, and when in doubt, call med control. Most importantly, if you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist. Or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org.
Welcome back to Dispatch Dysfunctional. Today, we're not just talking about surviving the job. We're talking about what happens when the job damn near breaks you and how you claw your way back. Our guest is Jeff Robertson, business strategist, speaker, podcast host, and someone who knows firsthand what it takes to stay standing when life hits like a freight train. He's been in public safety leadership, built businesses, fallen flat, and gotten back up stronger. And today, he's here to talk about resilience, the kind you don't find on a motivational poster. Jeff, welcome to Dispatch Dysfunctional. I gave listeners a quick rundown of who you are, but nobody tells their story better than you. Before we dive into questions, what do you want to add about yourself? And if people remember just one thing from this episode, what do you want that to be?
Biggest thing I tell you is life goes on. No matter where you're at, really get to know who you are, figure out who you are, and just remember no matter where you are in your journey, life's trying to teach you some things, learning some lessons along the way, and it will continue on regardless of whatever that situation might look like that you're going through or witnessing someone else go through.
Jeff, you said resilience is more than a buzzword. Let's start raw. What was the moment you realized you weren't unbreakable?
Well, man, I tell you, for me, I started in public safety when I was 15, and I worked all the way up through 2007 through EMS and law enforcement. 2007, I got a DUI. I was arrested. It ended not only my law enforcement career, but it ended my public safety career in general. In Virginia, um, I was no longer an EMT or anything. In Virginia, there's a law that you can't operate an emergency vehicle for 5 years. Um, so just from a kid, starting when I was 15 as a kid, I couldn't. I still struggle in some areas, but I can't read a tape measure. I don't know plumbing basic skills of what a lot of folks do. Is I spent all my time if it didn't have lights and sirens, I generally wasn't a part of it. Worked some of my first jobs working for ambulance services and in emergency rooms and things along those lines. So I didn't know basic skills of everything I knew involved EMS and lights and sirens. So it was a big struggle for me just to really start to relearn how I could apply my skills too.
That makes sense. In public safety leadership, everyone thinks the leader is steel. How did the cracks start showing for you?
Um, Probably too much drinking. Too much drinking, too much spending too much time with the folks inside the job. Taking too long to grow up. I could probably ramble down a list of just things that I feel like, but I tell you, the one thing that I really focus on, like when I'm speaking into that public safety community now, is just your identity. My identity was wrapped up in the job, and my identity was it took on when I was an EMT. I was the best damn EMT in the world, and that's what I was, and that's who I was. And I hung out with EMTs and firefighters and public safety professionals, and that just carried with me through law enforcement, to where I generally associated business people are no different, but I try to have a bigger mix of influence. And Yeah, it's good to have some folks come along and tell you when your normal is not normal anymore. And that's probably what I would tell you is before you take on those jobs, if you're a parent who's getting ready to turn your child loose, make sure, in EMS at a young age, just making sure that you're monitoring a little closer. I think we do things a little differently now. I haven't, other than mentoring, I don't run or actively work around any public safety anymore, other than teaching leadership and some of the opportunities I get to speak. So, getting to know who you are as a person and making sure that when you come off the truck, when you close out your shift, that you remember who you are, where you come from, what your core values are, independent of the job, man. I think those are, if I was going to give good advice, I give that on a regular basis. It's just like really get to remember who you are, because here's why, man, is sometimes we take on other people's problems as our own. We start to work in identifying more with some of the societal problems that, 'cause especially if you struggle in your own relationships or you're dealing with your own stuff, is you find comfort. And so one of the easiest place for folks with some underlying issues to hide is inside EMS. So just really make sure you get to know who you are.
That's very true, and I agree with you on that. Is we make the job, but we make it, but we can't let the job make us who we are. That's
Yeah.
how I feel about that. And like you said, a lot of EMS and a lot of first responders, we do fall back to alcohol and a bunch of the bad vices in the
Yeah.
end to try to help ourselves, and that's actually not helpful for your mental state or your physical state at all. You
No,
know,
a few beers, a few beers after the shift turns into, a few beers all the time. And one of the things I realized about me, dude, I was stuck in survival mode. My brain didn't know how to shut off. It started at a really young age to where, I always struggled to go to sleep. And when the rest of the world was shutting down, that's when my brain wanted to turn on. And um that carried with me longer than what I realized. And I didn't, some of that, like using that word survival mode, I probably didn't discover that particular word until maybe the last 5 years. And I've been off the job since '07. So just understanding what survival mode was and being able to process it just through some childhood stuff and some different things. But I always was attracted to the chaos. And that's what I learned, man, was just being attracted to the chaos because my I didn't know how to really turn it off. So my sleep was always not good. And when I would like I said, when I would go to lay down, is a few beers always help. You felt like that was helping you kind of fall asleep. And then if you overindulged, you passed out, but you slept worse, right? So it's I think I've had tons of experience with that as well, dude.
oh yeah, yeah. I've worked with a lot of older guys. I've worked with younger guys. The sad thing is, a lot of the younger guys that I've worked with seem to not understand their limits, and it wants to cause issues. No offense to you or anything, but it does seem to be the younger generation that gets the DUIs after work. It seems to be the younger generation that does all that. Like you said, you start at 15. I've seen a few of these guys that start now about 18. They get on the truck. They don't know life, and they turn the age of drinking, and they're like, "Oh, I can drink now," and they don't realize that it does collaborate with their work as well, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, it clashes, and when you go and when you're picking up the pieces of other folks' problems, you also develop a little bit of invincibility. You have a little bit of it won't happen to me syndrome. I'm kind of in control because of the problems I get to solve, and I've seen how things go sideways, so I'm able to control that a little bit better. Yeah, it's just little bit of ego. I think that's ego runs strong. It has to. You have to
Right.
have confidence inside of that job. If not, it will absolutely you will not make it there. So I think that's some of it too. Just a little bit of ego of how you approach the situation in general.
Yeah, it'll obliterate you.
Yeah, no, you're right there.
So what did failure look like in your world, and how did it hit differently than just losing a game or missing a rep in the gym?
Man, you know, that's all I knew. Man, I didn't know anything else. So, and this is a part that I've reflect on a lot. I talk about this a lot. Is and I let a lot of people down, and the guilt that I was carrying was sometimes overwhelming because that's all I knew how to do. My identity was totally wrapped up in that job. I had I had left. Me and the sheriff I was working for, we had gotten into a pretty heated argument the kind of the day before what would be. It was an election year, and he was frustrated with me, and I was frustrated with how he was doing things, and we kind of come to heat, and so I had felt like I had damaged that relationship, man. So just when you look at that overall failure was, you get to start thinking like, man, is this it? I mean, is life going to take me out of here? Am I getting ready to exit? What's this is getting pretty bad. And what I realized, it was just bad for me. There's folks going through hell way worse situations than I ever was. I was just caught up in my own selfishness, my own identity loss. And then, one of the things I like to point out to people, I was focused so hard on what I had lost that I was overlooking what I was gaining. And
That's a very
so when you look at that, one of your things, and I don't know, what do you remind me again? What's your role? What do you?
I'm right now I'm an offshore paramedic.
Yeah, right. So offshore paramedic, and you have this purpose that you know how to do, and for me was communication. I couldn't grasp how that applied to business and to working in a regular sales job, so to say. Problem solving, how that thing, leadership. I didn't have, wasn't. It took me longer to bridge the gap for the skills I had because I was doing undercover work when I exited, and I was like, my self worth was way down because I just couldn't get out of my own way. Um, Even before, there was a bunch of crap going on that just unnecessary stress going on in my life, and I didn't know how to. I got to where I was just didn't know how to process all of it, and I really needed to just take a little time out. Like I probably would have been a benefactor of a leave of absence, and so. But once I end up where I'm at, man, that's my struggle. Is only knew what I knew how to do, so it took me a few months to kind of recalibrate and be able to just go interview. I don't. You probably have this whole language you guys speak on offshore rig that I probably wouldn't understand. You're like, oh yeah, I'm here to introduce you to the terms. So imagine going from public safety and police work and all the different lingos that you had, and you're going into a regular interview, and you're trying to sit down and explain to someone. That was mine. Those are some of my biggest failures. Was probably 6 months after I left the job. Once I've landed a job, things started turning, and I started being able to put kind of the pieces of the puzzle together. Started reading more, and then but I still probably spent, dude, 2 years kicking the can about what I lost.
Right. Yeah. I can get that, and I bet you anything right now though you bet yourself better up than you thought you could have.
Dude, man, my podcast used to be Second Chance Podcast. I had a sign up about breaking curses because I always felt like the life that I had lived was like just kind of cursed, like I was bad luck or whatever. And working through some episodes and meeting some different people, like my whole perspective changed on that. Man, I have one of the things you'll find and that you'll hear me talk about, dude, and I love for your audience to hear this, is I got arrested by a state trooper. Fast forward to 2023, I am impacting his son's and his daughter-in-law's life. Like he had passed away. The trooper arrested me, passed away. I end up having this amazing interaction with the trooper's son. And so what happened on the side of the road that night and the life that it gave me and how bad I thought it was. it absolutely set me on pace to be a dad. Learned all this business stuff that I'm able to coach now and teach people and help folks like you that in coming out of public safety that they're trying to find new identities. And so I work with folks doing that. But my biggest failure and turned out to be the absolute best thing that ever happened to me. And I can't emphasize that's that whole part of life going on. 'Cause there was a
Right.
point in time I didn't know if life was going to go on, man. I was like, damn, this is getting hard. This is hard to get out of the way here. What's coming next? And as things started really shifting in my mind is and that those realizations again is it's that they haven't been too long ago to where I really sat down and realized just what an amazing journey. And then you get to talk about it now. We're going to share this story with a lot of folks, and there's a point in time when I was embarrassed beyond embarrassed just because of how selfish I was about my situation. Then I realized, like, man, this is pure gold and worth telling. Just so the folks that are on the job now just have someone who's out there. And I tell you that to tell you this. The other part was I was hard for me to find like someone who could relate to me. Like everybody's like, Jeff, you need to go talk to someone. I'm like, okay. Give me somebody that who's walked where I've walked at, who kind of has some understanding of what I had, and those people didn't exist. And I could go see an educated psychiatrist who lived a perfect life their whole life and never had drama, but they got their learning from school and a few beers at their local school bar. But
Right.
I lived some real life, so I think that's the other part too, dude. Is
And that's actually one thing I'm looking into right now is uh, P- PRT, peer response teams.
yeah,
I was talking to a lady about that. It would be nice to have more of those around the country because of that fact of, you know, being first responders. We don't like to talk to therapists. We don't like to talk to psychiatrists because they've never lived it. They don't know what we're actually going through. Maybe there's one or two out there. Don't get me wrong on that one, but 90% of them don't have any fucking clue on what the hell we're doing.
yeah. Yeah, you got that. You got, as time goes on, we produced a lot of, this is in negatives, but we produced a lot of Jeffs through our engagement in Afghanistan, Iraq, and we learned more about PTSD and moral injury. Our awareness increased a little bit because of that, and then we started to kind of notice like PTSD and military, and then we're able to say, wait a minute, what about these guys over here? And here's what I'll tell you, you know, um, I'm one of those guys like you could never convince me that I had PTSD or moral injury because I was just badass, right? You was not going, and even though now I may have softened my stance on some of that stuff to say, yeah, maybe starting at all the stuff that went on. Um, it's still hard for us to accept it as who we are sometimes.
Right. I agree. I was actually just recently diagnosed with PTSD myself, so I get that one.
What you're doing here, I keep doing it. Like find more Jeffs. And here's what I did was I did about 100 episodes of folks that had just been down on their luck, and what they helped me discover survival mode. They helped me discover, like just talking with some other like-minded individuals on my podcast absolutely led me to it led me to being able to carry this conversation way better. So what you're doing here for yourself and just kindly podcasting on, you're welcome to come on my show. We'll talk about your story
Sure.
and kind of how you ended up there because what happened with me was, man, as I started having more people on my show, is I and what they would say, there would always be one or two words. I'm like, wait a minute, say that again, because they would say something, and I don't know if you're like me. I've had people for years say this, and then I've never heard it, but one person comes along and they say it a particular way, and I'm like, well, hell yeah, yeah, I know what you mean, and it clicks. That's what I found on my podcast, dude.
Right.
It was therapy for me.
That's actually it's funny you say that. That's honestly the reason I started this was I started just telling my stories at the beginning of what I've went through, and then coming to Podmatch, I've met a lot of people, and I've been able to. I actually like the guest side of things more than the solo side.
Yeah,
I don't get me wrong, I'm still going to do some solos. I'm leaning more towards guest every more so than myself because of the fact of, like you said, we learn from each other. We're able to collaborate. We're able to actually tell stories that the listeners would never understand or feel unless it was done this way.
Yeah. And when you get into that, is I ended up with you get in some of those spiritual readers, you get in some of the mediums and some different folks that come on there with unique stories. Some of those got triggered through trauma and different things. And it really just is, I enjoyed it because it was eye opening to all the other things that was out there too. Um, yeah, there's a lot of freaking people, dude, that has had suffered through way more than old Jeff put himself through. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I had this whole new appreciation for the struggle and how we all end up to where we are in these unique situations. So good, keep doing that, dude.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, man.
Let's see. So you talk a lot about physical fitness and mental strength being tied together. When your world tilted, what role did physical fitness play keeping you sane or pulling you back on track?
So, the I was working out some a little bit. I could never wrap my head around it. I kind of had quit working out altogether. Gained a crap ton of weight because I actually probably went to eating and drinking at the same time. But I um, this phase, and my son came along. And when my son came along, I went to get life insurance, and they declined me. And I don't know about you, man. My son, like that was a big deal for me. But then it was an eye opener that I got. I couldn't get life insurance because of how unhealthy I was living. So I went through this thing of like, all right, I'm fixing this. So I started running, hardly eating anything, didn't understand calories in, calories out. I didn't understand protein. I just, again, one of these things to where that you could tell me till you're blue in the face, and that just would not register with me. It would go in one ear and out the other, and I just couldn't understand it. And I found I was made progress, got life insurance, and I had coming out of the police academy. I enjoyed group exercise. Like I just really enjoyed the fact that we struggled together, and we had a fit body boot camp in town. And I went to that fit body boot camp, took a class. It was all women in my first class I took, and I thought it was like, I was like, well, I'm not going to be invited back here. And they were like, hey, come back tomorrow. So I went to the car after that first day, and I sat there and I was like, I'm going to own one of these one day because it was exactly what I was looking for. So I ended up going through their doing their group exercise. I'd get up at like 4:30, hit the 5 o'clock class for about 6 months, and everything's coming into check. I'm starting to figure out a little more about the nutrition side of things. That doesn't click till years later. So I always thought if you just starve yourself, you would and eat salads, you would help keep your weight off. I didn't understand protein and
Right.
muscle building and all that stuff, right? So I dude, I ended up after about 6 months or so, they hired me to be a coach. So I coached the morning class. I would work out in one and then coach the other two, and me and this couple coaches would flip flop on that schedule. So we all got to work out and we all got to work. And then there was a point in time when they asked me to come be one of their a manager that oversaw all their locations. So I ended up doing that, and I really started dialing it in. And ultimately, COVID came along, and I had the opportunity to buy my gym. And I bought a Fit Body Boot Camp right in Virginia. They had shut down gyms during COVID, and I ended up buying. As soon as we could open back up gyms in 2020, I opened up owning my own location. So, like I tell people, I got so serious about fitness, I bought the place.
Awesome.
Folks, you don't have to go do that, but find what works for you. And as many people that's told me over the years, like, yeah, I'm not a group exercise person. A lot of those folks, if I can get them in, they can kind of just see the vibe and see that it's not really like it's a really unique thing, and I enjoy it. I got friends that put their headphones on, go Planet Fitness and work out, and able to do their own thing. And yeah, so that's what I did, man. Is I just kind of follow that path of if what I would tell everyone is if you can get up and work out if you were working in a stressful job, get up, work out first thing in the morning. And for me, my blood sugars were running heavy overnight. So I woke up with a little bit of energy, and if I'm not careful, it converted to anger easily once I got under stress. So just burning those overnight calories off and unnecessary sugar set me up for success for the day.
Hell yeah. So, what's the dumbest piece of advice you've heard about resilience or failing along the way?
Oh man, so much. Like, God dang, that's what I can tell you is what I can tell you when you find yourself there's evaluate your five or so influences. And you ain't gotta kick everybody out. But you really need to when you're starting to get that advice that's not moving you forward. Yeah, I think all right, so here's a good one, man. You know, back when I was hired on, you was the idea that you were going to go there at 18 years old and you were going to work 25 years, and once you hit 50 years of service, you could retire. And so when I'm explaining that to people now, I'm like, just imagine, a lot of people. First thing you do, a lot of people go out buy a house, buy a car, and they're in debt, so the job matters then. And what I tell people now, man, is like, go do public service. Go see a little bit of life or death and just see that what the world goes on in the world. Do it for 3 to 5 years and move on to something else. My probably some of the worst advice is that I made a life plan of being there forever, and life's plan wasn't for me to be there forever. So again, when you're feel like you're not moving forward, as if you remain on the job or what have you, just evaluate who's influencing you, making sure that when you're getting good advice that's appropriate at the time, and evaluate those friends and influences often. Um, that whole life, that bad advice sometimes is, man, we could probably that'd be a good book of like things I've been said. I'm working on this thing, dude. It's called Sometimes as Leaders We. It's like when I teach leadership, I'll start a whiteboard. And it's like sometimes as leaders we, and then you fill it in. Like we lie, we cheat, we fudge, we push against numbers, we make stuff up. You're trying to trying to get somebody off your back. You fib, whatever it might be. It's just a whiteboard of fun. Me and you could probably start one on bad public safety advice.
I'm sure. I mean, it's funny you brought up leadership like that. As the whole realm of leaving and all that. If leadership would actually be true leadership in first or just public safety, period, um, they would actually let their people grow. They would actually help them achieve goals. They wouldn't keep everyone, down on the totem pole in the end. To me, that's the biggest pain in the ass in first response is the leadership. Is they sometimes forget where they came from. They forget their peons, if you want to call them that, or their, you know, it's ridiculous.
If you're gonna climb the ladder, you got to be willing to hold it for everybody else.
Yes, exactly.
Right? That's John Maxwell. I think he's the one that framed it like that, and I'm just stealing off of his stuff. It's a really great way of putting it. If you're going to climb that ladder, you got to be able to hold it. That's part of where a little bit. This one bothers me. It's why I enjoy public safety podcasts. I didn't get to stay around and mentor, and I'm not in. I haven't been invited back to like anything local, just to mentor or work with, or just kind of go through my story of like, hey, these are things where you can help your leaders get better because this is the stuff that I went through. So being able to come here and talk about it. The other thing I would tell you along those lines is where I don't know where you were, but when I hired in at my place, getting promoted was almost unheard of. It was so competitive. Turnover was like it wasn't like it is now. If you got hired as a deputy sheriff in the county that I was in, you were it was a big deal. And if you made any kind of rank, you either had money, your family had money, like it was some politics that went into it, or you was a damn good police officer. Um, so turnover was non-existent. So a lot of guys that hired in as deputies and retired as deputies because there was never any upward mobility. There wasn't any leadership opportunity. So keep that in mind too. Now turnover is at an all-time high. So just upward mobility is easier in some ways, but you get inexperience. And when you get inexperience, you get uncertainty and uncomfortableness. And then what you just said is folks that are afraid to hold the ladder because I'm not, but so much smarter than you.
Right. And we all learn from each other in the end on that too. That's another thing that I was talking about with a firefighter from Australia the other day when I was talking with him. Is me and him had the same agreement. As if the leaders didn't lead, if the leaders actually practiced and not just led, that would be a totally different story.
Yeah.
You know.
You get leadership is, yeah, there's a little bit of, there's always, you got to be in it, you got to be wanting, you got to be able to play the game and get in the you got to be able to call the play and be in the huddle. I think that's just that earned respect, and that we're able to get, and that having everybody's back, and that sometimes in public safety is, you know um we don't stand up for each other as much. I had great bosses. Like my bosses stood up to me until they could not stand up for me anymore. And
Right.
I absolutely painted them into every bad corner I possibly could. For the most part, I had a few that were just did not jive with me. We didn't really see eye to eye on a lot of things. And those are just personality conflicts that are going to exist. But when you're when you're there is if you get accelerated too fast and you don't develop, and again, identity, knowing who you are, being comfortable with it, um, and you gotta have the heart of a teacher when you're going to be a leader in law enforcement with the young folks. Is just working with them and help kind of mold them in, because your upward mobility, your next phase as a leader is based on who can replace you a lot of times.
Yes, sir.
Once you make sergeant, once you make a corporal, is you've got to be cultivating your replacement. So when it comes test time, you're able to move up your ladder. So the mentoring and um, becomes super important then too. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
and the other thing, man, I'll tell you, when you go to leadership, you got to think like a leader. And when you're that frontline responder, there has to be a little bit of shift because you start focusing on the overall mission. Downside is, it's all, most of it, like where you work, is probably private, but a lot of our public safety is government. There is you know there is a sometimes the best people don't get promoted just because they're probably really set to be a good leader, um, but they're overshadowed by some of the just wrong factors, I think, when it comes to that as well. So on the public side, they deal with way more kind of just the bureaucratic stuff that you private sectors don't have to.
I've worked for government and private, so I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
uh, so here you brought this up. So you've called failure a teacher, but not a gentle one. What's one lesson you had to bleed for that you now that you teach others?
Yeah, and kind of what we've touched on, right? You is knowing yourself, having the right people around you, and it's people that don't mind having the best of times with you, but also help you pump the brakes when you need to. And that's sometimes just not hanging out with. Make sure you got a group of friends outside of your public safety friends, and you have to go hang out with them. You can't just have a group of friends and be like, no, I'm hanging out with my cop friends today.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not how that works.
yeah, you got, because and here's what happens. It's just there's some, because they absolutely think you walk on water a lot of times because of the stuff you get to do and how cool you are, and they're telling all their friends like my buddy over here, and he does this and he does that, and he doesn't. But they're also some of the first people to come along and be like, man, every time I see you, you're drinking, or every time I see you, you and your wife are having an issue, or you're arguing, right? They just kind of call you out on some things that sometimes other people, that they're like, hey, this is not healthy. Take physical fitness is a big deal. Get rid of that negative stress. I probably had to, I tell people now, man, I was struggling so hard to dial in my physical fitness that I felt like I needed to buy the place, and I probably didn't need to do all that to get to where I wanted to be. But it's been a great journey. But you know, have some other skills that you can fall back on, or and it's not skills, but it might be hobbies. Like it may be just find a hobby outside. Because when I got to where I was doing undercover work, my hobby was police work. I didn't. There was no. We hung out, we partied, and then outside that, we was on the job, right? So just a hobby that you can convert into a job at some point in time. It's something that occupies your time. Um, Kids made a big difference for me, but I'm glad I didn't have kids when I was in public safety, just because of what I'm able to do. And my heart breaks for my friends that are on the job and they're working shift work or they miss games and things like that. So I'm glad that timing wise, life gave me kids later.
Right.
Um, but man, you know what I would is just if you start to struggle, you cannot turn left or right without finding help. And you know don't set in your thoughts and feelings. You know, you can. There's always folks out there that can give you some solid and not disrupt your life and not hold what you're saying in confidence. And so make sure of that. Um, those are like, dude. And here's another one, man. Is you know, some of that leftover stuff that I thought was just part of me growing up was as a kid there were some leftover things that I probably really needed to, and I've done that through my podcast, is just talk through it, just get right with it, acknowledge it, find some closure, and put together or kind of put to bed some of that chaos. And I think that really helped me as I am able to have this conversation way better, like I said a minute ago, is
Yeah.
going back and just really sitting down and, you know, getting right with some people that I needed to, but then also just going through some childhood stuff and talking to the right people and processing that. That carries over longer than what I think you realize sometimes.
Yes, sir. So, let's see. So, what's one myth about resilience you want to shatter right now as well?
We said that when we opened up. Life will continue on. There's no. I watch a lot of. I can probably think of five police officers that hit down their luck, DUI, lost their job, argument with girlfriend, and got suspended, and they go kill themselves, and they feel like that's their rock bottom moment because they're you know when that happens, there's a like I can tell you, man, phew, your pride is shattered, and for every time you poked your chest out, now you got to be the one. It's when you walk in them rooms, you got to be the one that's who's willing to take your own failures and shortcomings. And what I would tell you when it comes to resilience, this is an absolute here. I thought everybody cared, and it turns out they didn't give a shit. Now, when they saw me, they wanted like even today. If you if you're with me, you're like, dude, you've been off the job for almost 15, 20 years now. And when I run into people, they're like, hey, how's things going at the sheriff's office? I'm like, yeah, I don't do that no more. And they're like, what? You don't? I'm like, yeah, I don't do that no more. But because that's the where they assimilate. You know, my identity for them is still there because I did it for so long. But when you get down into it, is you're gonna have a moment of about 24 to 72 hours to where you really are in the limelight, but just lay as low as you possibly can. Don't do anything dumb. And what you'll realize is most people move on and you are not on their mind because they got their own crap they're dealing with. So don't think, when you look at resilience, don't get wrapped into up in how you're worried about the world is going to receive you because they generally have their own crap that they've moved on to. And I like in my case, I was the one that would invoke that just how I would act. And but turns out nobody cared. One of my buddies told me one time, he goes, I was like, man, I'm just afraid to go down there, like in where we used to hang out at. I'm like, I'm afraid to go there. He goes, they don't remember you. He said, what makes you think they remember you? I'm like, hey, you know how it goes. Just you skilling. He goes, dude, they don't know who you are. They don't.
But
And it was really good for me to hear that because I thought everybody cared. And that was just me being selfish again. I mean, nobody give a shit. Just move
right,
on. All right. Just lay low, manage your stuff, fix your exposures, make sure your money's flowing. But you don't have to do anything crazy. Life will absolutely go on for you.
That's very true. So for the medic who's just buried a call they can't unsee, for the firefighter who's carrying survivor's guilt, for the cop who's one step away from cashing out their badge, what's one thing you want them to hear right now, hear in your voice right now?
When we dealt with a lot of crap, and but it's not our job to take on other people's problems. And that sounds a little cold, but it's when the job is merely the job, we process it in a way sometimes that tries to make it our fault or our problem. And if we and it in a lot of cases is we just because of what we witnessed and what we was a part of, and we harbor that and we carry that. Figuring out how you can find closure with those things, and again, talking your way through it, talk to the right people. But you know, we've all had this calling to come out here and help. And when you feel like that you it's running its course for you and the chaos is becoming too much whatever, there's other places in the world that you can go help. There's you don't you can go, you can find help and purpose, man. I landed at a trailer dealership and I could not figure out how I was going to make these sales work. And once I figured out that my product was helping people get their jobs done, get their stuff where they was trying to go, and ultimately my job was to keep helping people, it was like a light bulb moment went off for me. So remember that. Like we all like to help, but you're not married. We don't sign lifetime contracts, and sometimes it's change. Sometimes a little bit of change and taking a breather from it, going doing something else for a while, seeing that you don't like that because if you got an option to go back, most people go back to it because they like the people and they love the chaos and they're married to those things. But spend a little time making sure that you don't take that stuff as part of your life, and those problems that you interact with and the tasks that you're dealt with every day is as much as they're your problem for 30 to minutes to an hour. If you're if you're working a long-term case, you might be hound dogging and working your case, and it might take longer to get through until you find closure. But once it's done, it's your part's done. Move on, and move on in a positive way. And if that involves sitting down with someone like me or you and talking through it, and I've done some stuff like that, man, just to help find just some closure. I'm glad you brought this up. I am. What's been on my mind was an accident I worked in 1999, January of '99. A little girl got killed, and one of my podcast guests kind of triggered that memory, and so I've been working back through that one. I was telling my wife, my wife's like, "You never told me this story," and I'm like, "Yeah, it was a car got pushed. So school bus is sitting here. This car is sitting behind the stop school bus, and a rollback comes and hits the car, and it just
Oh,
yeah. So, and the little girl was, we worked on her. Her brother survived, but her and her grandmother was sitting on the passenger or the driver's side, and the impact was on that for the bus was right there. So there was a lot of, so that one had came up, and I don't think those memories ever go away, but I think about that purpose that I got to serve there. Um, and like I was like, I mean, there's nothing. I just did what I was supposed to do and what I was trained to do. But that one stung for a while. Like it was like a little kid. It was eight. She was 8 years old, and it stung for a little while. And I would just got. I'm glad you asked me this. I got to processing this the other day, and I was telling her about it. And but I think when I look at that, it was like I really did all I could do, and it was just neat for me just to go back and find her name and look it up and just be like, hey, and I tell you why I did that was like, this is what I had to do. I had to go back to Jeff Robertson in 1999, getting out of his police car, and I had missed her sitting on the side of the road. Like she had, when the car collapsed, you ever, like, think about it tonight when you sit, or if when next time you're in a car, you're in the back seat, when the collapse is happening, the back door comes open. And in Virginia at the time, you didn't have to be restrained as a backseat passenger. And even if you did, the the impact was so violent that it had pushed everything around, and the impact just pushed her out on the ground.
oh
So
wow.
I had overlooked her. This is what I did. This is the advice I need to give everybody. What I had to do, because it was on my mind and I was like working through it, was I had to go back to, kind of in my head, I went back to that scene, and as I was walking up, and I saw the grandma and I saw her brother who was out of the car running around, and someone said, "Hey, check the little girl." And I'm like, "What little girl?" And they're like, "The little girl." And I'm like, because I was going to the school bus. And they're like, "Everybody on the bus is fine. Go here." So I found her. So I stopped there in my head, and because I was pissed off because I had missed her. Like, you're talking seconds, dude. We're not
Right.
talking hours. Like, I
Right.
just had walked. I just didn't look down. I was looking up because I was focused on the bus. Here's what I did: was I went back to kind of that Jeff Robertson in my mind, and I leaned down beside him in my head, and I said, "Hey, man, it ain't your fault. You good." And I just told him, "Hey, you're forgiven. You didn't do anything wrong." And I just had a quick conversation with myself. And where I got that from, dude, there's this thing called the Ho'oponopono prayer. I'm
Okay.
gonna send it to you. You ever heard of it?
I have not.
All right. So it's just a forgiveness prayer. And how I used it, and I turned some corners with this dude, was I went back. I was telling him about survival mode. I was through an old album of me as a kid, and I found this picture. Me and him kind of made eye contact. It's 4-year old me, and I just sit down with. I pulled the picture out and I set it down, and I just said, "Listen, man, I'm sorry, but we're good now. You're safe. And I just had this weird conversation with this picture of me, and I was like, hey, you're safe. You're good. This life has turned out good for us, and I apologize. You didn't know what you didn't know back then, because he went through a little more hell than what he needed to at 4 years old, right?
Right.
And I just said, hey, man, things have changed. What you were doing back then, no, we didn't know. So you don't have to be ashamed of anything. So the more I did that, so if I have a negative memory, um, if I have a negative memory like that or something that comes up, I'll kind of go back to where I'm off. Like, hey, what did I do here that kind of triggered this? So I'd like for you, I'll send you the stuff. I'll send you a podcast to listen to where the guy really helped me understand it. I got to record my own version. So
Yeah.
I'll send it to you though, dude, because it's very good about going back to your PTSD moment and just walking with yourself and just being like, all right, right here's where like, hey man, that ain't your fault. You're like, hey, even if it was your fault, just recognize it and saying, hey, I'm sorry, yeah, you're forgiven. You're forgiven, and you're okay now. Let's move on. Try
Right.
that sometimes, folks. If you're struggling after that call, over a couple of days, if you'll just sit down and kind of debrief where you felt like you're off in your head or what have you, and just go back and forgive that person, who was there, and just say, hey, you didn't know what you didn't know, or hey, we dropped the ball, we screwed up, but I forgive you. And
Right.
because
That's right.
forgiving ourselves is the hardest thing to do sometimes, brother.
Yes, sir.
I rambled for a while on that one, man. I appreciate you letting me tell all
All
that.
good. Hey, I appreciate all your stories. Let's see. Yeah, let me see where. Okay. So that was Jeff Robertson. Proof resilience isn't about standing tall 24/7. It's about learning how to get back up when you've been knocked flat. If you want to hear more about Jeff, check out his show and his work at www.jeffreyrobinson.com. And for you listening, remember resilience isn't optional. It's this in this job, but you have to remember you can't do it alone, and you don't need to do it alone. Any final words, Jeff?
Yeah, man. If you need anything, jeffreyrobertson.com. Reach out. I'm active on Instagram. So if this speaks to you, if you want me to send you that podcast I listen to, or if you just need some advice from old Jeff, send me a direct message on my Instagram account. You'll find that through my website. Anything I can do to support you, I'll make sure you let me know. Don't suffer in silence.
If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy, you're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone, not in this job, not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.